inside this verse, there is a story and there is a question. And we'll get to both. But let's talk first about Isaac. Isaac, one word to describe Isaac I would use is unremarkable. His life was unremarkable. Yet in Hebrews 11, he's listed among the heroes of the faith, but his life was really unremarkable. Among the patriarchs, he lived the longest living patriarch, yet he was most unremarkable. His father was more famous than he was. His son was notorious. Jacob was notorious. His grandson was gifted in an extraordinary way, Joseph. But what can you say really about Isaac? What happened in Genesis 22 was more about his father than about him. You could also say when you read Genesis, 50 chapters in Genesis, of the 50, 12 go to Abraham, 10 are devoted to Jacob, 11 are devoted to Joseph, and 2 are devoted to Isaac. Just 2. It's not a lot about his life. His life was very unremarkable. You and I can feel unremarkable in our life because there isn't a lot of things people say about us. We don't have a lot of visible fruit. We're in the show me state, show me everything. Not Maryland, but in general, this generation, they want to see it. It's got to be in front of them. And I guess in some respects, that's every generation. But in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 20, we hear something else about Isaac that we didn't read in Genesis. And that is that he makes a decision. He invokes future blessings on Jacob and Esau. And those blessings we talk about, those blessings started back in 12, but he's carrying it on, the lineage of the blessing. And that's the outstanding thing about Isaac, is that he carried on the blessings of the Abrahamic covenant until the next line. He invoked future blessings on Jacob and Esau, which is a great lesson. It's never too late to walk by faith. You don't really get this testimony that Isaac was this great man of faith through most of his life. But at the end of his life, you get this picture of him being a man of faith. And so much important was this decision that is listed here in Hebrews chapter 11 years later. It's never too late to walk by faith. Maybe this year has not been a great year for you in terms of faith. Maybe you wouldn't consider yourself to be a hero of the faith. Maybe you belong more in Hebrews 6 than Hebrews 11. Maybe you feel like as you grade your faith, which, by the way, you should never do. You should never judge your faith or judge anybody else's faith, because the only one who measures faith is God. So the only accurate understanding of your faith would come from God. So he is the only one who judges whether you're faithful or unfaithful. We have a hard time with giving God his responsibilities in our life. He's responsible to judge my faith. And it's never too late to trust God. If I didn't trust God this morning, I can trust God this afternoon. If I didn't trust God this afternoon, I can trust God. There's always an opportunity. In time is the opportunity of faith. Faith is not for heaven. Faith is not for eternity. Faith is strictly for time. It is a mechanism in time that reveals our relationship with God. That's what faith is. God gives us this opportunity. He puts us in this from birth in Romans chapter 12, verse 3, designed for fellowship with God in a specific period of time. The measure of faith that you get is given by God to be used for a specific period of time, the length of your life. If that's 16 years or 60 years, it's the length of your life. And every day of that life, I have the opportunity to trust God. And God does not say compare yesterday's faith with today's faith. He says live for faith today. And Isaac, 180 years old, at the end of his life, the decisions he made at the end of his life by faith, we're reading about today. That maybe you didn't get it right your whole life, but you're still living. As there's breath and as there's time in your life, there's opportunity. And what is that opportunity? Not to do something great for God, but simply to trust God, to have faith in God. And Isaac did that. It's recorded here. And he says, the writer says, rather, that he invoked future blessings on Jacob and Esau. Now, he's carrying forth the blessing of the Abrahamic covenant that was given or promised to Abraham in Genesis chapter 12, 1 through 3. That covenant was unconditional. In other words, it doesn't matter what's going to happen with God's people. He's going to honor his covenant with his people. And Isaac has an important role as part of the lineage of Abraham. Every generation has to carry forth that blessing. Every generation has to name an heir who would pick up that blessing. Now, he's the first one that's kind of faced with a choice. He has two children. He has Esau and he has Jacob. So now he is faced with the choice of choosing which one of these two guys would, through the line, continue for the Abrahamic covenant, for the offspring. Because it says singularly in Galatians chapter 3, Abraham, your offspring, not your offsprings, but your offspring is an individual person. And Isaac had the responsibility at the end of his life, not in good health, to decide which offspring would get that. And we know that Isaac liked Esau. We also know a little bit about Jacob's character. Jacob didn't suddenly become this trickster swindler as an adult. He grew up that way. So imagine Isaac's and Rebekah's household. Who's the mischievous one? Who's the one who's always in trouble? Who's the con artist? Who's the one cheating? It's Jacob. So it wasn't like all of a sudden Jacob became this dark figure that kind of lost his way as a teenager. He was like this all the way through. So of course, being that kind of guy, who are you going to run to when you're in trouble in the house? Your mother. So he connected with Rebekah very early and Esau was not that sort. He connected more with his father. And plus also Esau caused a lot less trouble than Jacob did. So maybe in Isaac's mind, he felt like, obviously the choice is Esau. He's not a troublemaker. He doesn't make mistakes. He's like me. I can trust him. Yeah, the line should, if it started with me, it should continue with Esau. And some people even think that maybe the unremarkableness, we can use that word, of Isaac made him to think about choosing a more remarkable heir. And that Esau actually looked like a more acceptable choice. That vicariously, Isaac is trying to improve the stature of the line by picking the stronger male. He wasn't a strong male. Let me pick a strong male so that the next line is stronger than I. It's possible that maybe Isaac saw a little bit of the man he wanted to be in Esau, rather than Jacob, the man he didn't want to be. But for whatever reason, Esau's got a favorite, his father. Isaac is chosen, in his mind, Esau is the guy. Now, historically already, at this point in the story, we're into the story of Genesis chapter 27 and Genesis chapter 26. Historically in the story, it seems like Esau is drawn to his father Isaac and vice versa, and Rebekah is drawn to Jacob and vice versa, and they're close. And this didn't just happen, it kind of developed in the household. It's funny when you see marriages where you have a boy and a girl and a mother and a father, the children split. One child is usually a little bit closer to the other one, and the vice versa. It just happens. So it happened in this family. Now, in this story, evidently, what has already happened has been the blessing, the birthright has been taken. He sold it for beans. Remember that part of the story that goes back in 25, 26 of Genesis? So already, Jacob has demonstrated his cunningness to take things from Esau. And this is not the only thing. He may have taken something else when they grew up, because later when Esau speaks about Jacob, he says, you're always like this. You don't accuse someone of being always like this unless they've done it more than once or twice. So when he says you're always like this, that means maybe when we were young kids, you were taken from me then too. You'd outsmarting me every step of the way and hiding behind mama every time. So this is like a culture. This is like the way they get at each other. So evidently, Isaac is aware of the cunningness of Jacob, but he wants Esau to get it. So what would you do? Normally in an Oriental family, when the blessing is being bestowed, it's a public event. Trace it from Genesis all the way through. It was a public event. The patriarch of the family called the members together. You see this later on in the life of Joseph and Jacob. You call them, it's a public event. The whole family is summoned. Isaac makes it a private event. Isaac says, Esau, you come here. I don't want your brother to know about this. I'm going to break the culture and make it private. Just me and you. Because I want you to get it. Maybe he was scared that if he did it publicly, Jacob would find a way to break it. Maybe he was intimidated by Jacob's ability to trick his brother out of what he gets. He wanted to make sure this time, I'm going to make sure Jacob doesn't get it. And maybe Esau says, you know what, Dad, that's a good protection. I like that. But he says, I'm dying, I'm not well. He's almost saying, I want to make sure you get it. So go get me some food and I'm going to give it to you privately. This is a Bedouin community. They got tents. There's no soundproofing. There is no privacy. So this conversation is being heard by Rebekah, and Rebekah hears that, and Rebekah says, oh, my boy is in trouble. He's not going to get what I believe he's supposed to get. So what's interesting is, just like with, well, a lot of ways you can say that, but anyway, she decides to make sure he's going to get what God has prophesied for him to get. Sometimes you know God's will and you want to make sure it happens. So God, I know you said it, but I'll enforce it. So that's exactly what happened. She makes a plan. Her plan was very simple. I heard what he wants. I'll cook the food. You'll bring it in. You'll serve it. You'll steal the blessing. She organized it. Jacob was not the brains in this at all. He was just the brawn. He just made it happen. He was not the brains at all. But he was like, yes, sure. And he was scared about the fact that he didn't sound like Esau. He didn't look like Esau. And you know the story. He goes in with the animal skins. He said, you have the voice of Jacob, but you have the arms of Esau. He feels him. He blesses him. And one of my favorite verses, it says later in the story, it says that he, as soon as he realized what he had done, he trembled violently. I'm trying to figure out what that looks like, to tremble violently. But he trembled violently in verse 32. And then he says, who it was it that hunted the game and brought it to me, and I ate it all before you came? I had blessed him. Esau right away figured out what happened. Jacob got me again. Even in secret, he got me again. Now that's the story. That's the story. Esau blesses not his guy. Esau blesses Jacob. Esau loses the blessing that his father wants to give him through trickery. Rebekah and Jacob cheated and stole the blessing like Jacob stole the birthright. To this. This is more than just him doing this and her saying that. But there's God in all of that. And if I find the God in all of that, in whom my faith is in anyway, when I find the God in all of that, I can say, okay, God, it is well. Okay, God, it didn't work out the way I wanted it to work out, but it is well. And when these things happen, Isaac's faith submitted to God. Can you submit to God when the plan does not match your preference? Can you submit to God when everything doesn't go the way it should be? Can you submit to God by faith when things are unfair? Can you submit to God when things are unjust? Everything Rebekah and Jacob did in this story was wrong. How could this possibly be God? If anything, Isaac and Esau up until this point operated in integrity, and they still got taken advantage of. Can you still submit to God's activities by faith? See, when you submit in the situation, I'm not submitting my faith to what has happened to me. I'm not submitting my faith to what's been done. I'm not submitting my faith to a person, but by faith I'm submitting my relationship to God. It's to God. And the fruit of my submission is his responsibility. The fruit of whatever happens and my submission is unto God. This is Ephesians chapter 5, 21 and 22. The wife submits to the husband as unto the Lord. Is he a bad husband? It's as unto the Lord. Is he a good husband? It's as unto the Lord. Where is the submission? Where is the submission hits the same target that my faith does. Why do I submit to church leadership? It's unto the Lord. Not because they're great men, it's unto the Lord. Then I can drop my evaluations of circumstances and situations and say, well, I only submit when it looks fair or it looks just or it looks equitable. They cheated. And it looks like they won. Doesn't it? Looks like they won. But did they win? Here's what genuine faith looks like. Genuine faith submits to God. That's genuine faith. And to his plan, even when I don't understand. And maybe, in a lot of cases, to the church, when I may not always agree. I'm not a member because I always agree. I'm a member because I'm called. My faith is in the one who called me. Faithful is he who called you and will also do it. 1 Thessalonians 5:24. Now, two men in this story. Here's the choice. Two men in this story. One's a father, one's a son. Okay? They both have been cheated. Who are they? Isaac the father and Esau the son. They have been cheated. Were they cheated? Yes. Was it wrong? Yes. Did God allow it? Yes. Here's what happens. When this happens in your life, when you feel like your hope is not fulfilled, when you feel like equity is missing in the plan, that playground morality, I need everything to be even and fair, is not fitting my adult lifehood. The boss is not fair. Things are not even in the marriage. Who will I be? I'll either be Isaac or I'll be Esau. When the plan doesn't go the way I would have it go, what happened to Esau? He walked away from God. In Hebrews chapter 12, that's where you find Esau. You find Isaac in Hebrews 11 and Esau in Hebrews 12. In Hebrews 12, he's called the next chapter, not the hero of the faith, but Hebrews 12:16, he's called a godless man. Born into the family of the patriarchs, born as the son of Esau, he walks out on the family, he walks out on God because things didn't go the way he thought it would go. I got cheated out of the birthright, I got cheated out of the blessing, I'm going to go marry a strange woman, and I'm done. Here's what can happen when you don't walk by faith when things don't go your way. You can walk away from God. Not me. And it says in verse 17 of Hebrews 12, he found no chance to repent, though he sought it with tears. He lived at a distance from God and God's people, and he had no capacity to repent. And what else was he? Bitter. And later on, what's so interesting is later on, naturally he was reconciled to his brother, but he never got reconciled to God. And that's why he's in Hebrews 12 and not Hebrews 11. Because it's not important that I'm so much reconciled to my brother. I will not always be reconciled to my brother because all relationships are not fixable. God didn't give you relationships so you could go to Home Depot and fix them. You will live and die with broken relationships. But the one relationship that's always fixable because of the cross is the one with. But Esau was godless. He could have been a hero of the faith. He could have been in the previous chapter. How did he end up in chapter 12 instead of chapter 11? He couldn't handle when things don't go right. What she did is not right. What they did to me is not right. Well, okay, now with your faith, what are you going to do with that? You got faith. You found inequity. What are you going to do? Before you had the inequity, what was your mandate? Trust God. While you have the inequity, what's your mandate? Trust God. Now that it's happened, what's your mandate? Trust God. That's your default. It's always back to me trusting God. That's where it ends. That's where it starts. Or, instead of Esau, I can be Isaac. I can be unremarkable. I can be not special at all, really, from my perspective. But I submit to God. And in a little tiny verse in Hebrews 11, verse 20, that just kind of barely mentions me. I don't get all the play and all the chapters, but just barely mentioned. It just describes me as a man of faith. Isaac is not described as a man of fruit, productivity, even profitability. You wonder, are you sure he's family? You check his dental records, are you sure he's family? He was so unremarkable compared to Jacob, even Esau, Joseph. He doesn't fit in that group. Yet he's in the heroes of the faith. He's in chapter 11. Because of what he did? No, because of who he trusted. That's your ticket into chapter 11. Walk by faith. Walk by faith. This is what it is. He trusts God. Faith submits to God. Even in a plan you wouldn't have chosen for yourself. Faith submits to God. When it appears like the plan is not working for you, faith submits to God. When I feel I've been taken advantage of, and by the way, if you don't walk by faith, you'll still be taken advantage of. So don't think unbelief protects you from what being taken advantage of. Nobody takes advantage of me. You live in America, trust me, everybody takes advantage of you. In layers, they do, trust me. That's the word today. The story, the question, and the choice. In the plan of God, will I respond like Isaac the father, or will I respond like Esau the son? Will I walk away from God when things don't work, or will I draw near to God? Even when I understand, what did Job say? Though he slay me, I will trust him. Will I continue to trust him? What they did was wrong, yes, but the evaluation of my life is not what they did. The evaluation of God's plan, what would they do? Well, God is love. Well, if God is love, why would he allow this thing to happen? First of all, you're using circumstances to evaluate love. You don't measure love by circumstances or actions. Instead of investigating your suffering, investigate God's love. Then you understand why he is love, not because why we suffer. We got the wrong question. So what does my faith do? My faith is how I get to know God. Unfair circumstances are just opportunities or venues where I get to know God. But what's the primary thing here? To get to know God. Why am I still alive? To get to know God specifically in faith. In heaven, I'll get to know God, but not with faith. So this venue is specifically for two things. Me to use my faith to get to know God. That's it. Every day in every way. By faith, get to know God. Alone, corporately, in trouble, out of trouble, hot, cold, get to know God. That's the utility of my faith. Not to accomplish things for God, but to get to know God. And in my getting to know God, I will accomplish things for God. But the first part is getting to know God. Why did God come in the garden in Genesis? To get to know Adam and Eve, and for them to get to know him. Right? Why do we draw near to God in Hebrews 10:22? To get to know God. And it doesn't matter what happens. I am called to be Isaac. I'm not called to be Esau. I'm called to walk by faith. And yeah, they cheated. And yeah, they were wrong. And I'm right. And it still didn't work out. The good guys didn't win. This is not some B Hollywood movie. The hero's not dressed in white and the villain in black. That's not how this works. Right? We're on a different level, on a different level of faith. We don't look just this, it's a different dimension of faith. We're seeing God in diverse circumstances, right? And there's diverse grace in 1 Peter 4 for that. But God has called us to be Isaacs. We look unremarkable, but some of the biggest decisions of our life are simply trusting God. And when we do, the fruit of that faith, God does great things. Amen? Amen.